The private dining room at Blackstone Manor overlooked the city's financial district, its floor-to-ceiling windows providing a perfect view of the glass towers where billion-dollar deals were made daily. Dad had chosen this venue carefully for his 65th birthday celebration. It was where the city's most powerful business leaders held their important meetings, where merger announcements were made over champagne and handshakes, where success was measured in quarterly earnings and market valuations. 50 of the most influential people in our region sat around the mahogany conference table, their conversations flowing between stock portfolios, real estate investments, and the kind of high-stakes business ventures that shaped our city's economy. These were CEOs of major corporations, senior partners at prestigious law firms, prominent investors whose decisions affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. And there I was, sitting quietly in the corner wearing my simple navy blazer from a mid-range store, feeling like an observer at someone else's celebration of success. "Rebecca." My father's voice boomed across the room with the authority that had made William Peterson Williams one of the most respected business leaders in the state. At 65, Dad still commanded attention wherever he went, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom suit impeccable, his presence radiating the kind of confidence that came from building a business empire from nothing. The Peterson Group, Dad's investment and development company, owned half the commercial real estate in our city and had annual revenues exceeding $200 million. He was exactly the kind of self-made success story that business schools used as case studies. "Everyone," Dad announced, gesturing for the room's attention, "I want you to meet my youngest daughter, Rebecca. She's been exploring different career paths." The way he said, "exploring different career paths," made it sound like I'd been unemployed for the past 6 years rather than building something significant. The conversation around the room paused as polite attention turned toward me. I recognized most of these faces from business journals and newspaper features. Thomas Mitchell, who ran the largest construction company in the region, Sarah Chin, who owned a chain of luxury hotels, James Morrison, whose financial services firm managed portfolios for half the wealthy families in our area. "Rebecca's been working in consulting," Dad continued, his tone carefully neutral. "She's been learning about business operations, helping small companies with their administrative needs." Several people nodded with the kind of polite interest usually reserved for discussing someone's community service work or charitable volunteer activities. "How interesting," said Patricia Davidson, the CEO of our region's largest healthcare system. "What kind of consulting do you do, dear?" Before I could answer, my older brother Marcus jumped in with his practiced smile. At 38, Marcus was everything our family valued: executive vice president at Peterson Group, Dad's obvious successor, and the golden child who'd never disappointed anyone's expectations. "Rebecca works with startups and small businesses," Marcus explained with the condescending patience of someone making excuses for a wayward relative. "You know how these young companies are. They need help with basic business processes, filing systems, that sort of thing. Very hands-on work." The way he described it made me sound like a glorified office manager rather than someone who'd been building strategic business relationships for 6 years. "That's wonderful," said Dr. Martinez, who served on several corporate boards. "Small business support is so important for economic development. Every successful company starts somewhere." His tone suggested he was trying to be encouraging about what was obviously entry-level work that might eventually lead to more substantial opportunities. My sister Jennifer, 35 and a senior partner at the city's most prestigious law firm, nodded approvingly. "Rebecca's always been very practical. Not everyone can jump straight into high-level business operations like Marcus did. Sometimes people need to start smaller and work their way up." I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The one that came whenever my family felt compelled to explain away my career choices to their successful friends and colleagues. The truth was infinitely more complicated than their explanations suggested, but correcting them would require revealing information I wasn't ready to share publicly. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chin, my chief operations officer. "Congratulations. Peterson Group acquisition finalized 10 minutes ago. Board meeting scheduled for Monday to discuss integration strategy. This changes everything." I quickly silenced my phone and slipped it back into my purse, but not before Dad noticed the interruption. "Rebecca, phone away during dinner," he said with the mild reproach of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Whatever consulting emergency you're dealing with can wait until after we've finished celebrating." Several people chuckled at his reference to my consulting emergency, clearly amused by the idea that small business administrative work could generate the kind of urgent communications that interrupted important social gatherings. Of course, Dad. Sorry. Now then, Dad continued, raising his champagne glass, I wanted to take a moment to talk about success and what we've all accomplished in our respective fields. The room fell silent, all attention focused on our patriarch as he prepared to deliver what was clearly a prepared speech. I've spent 40 years building Peterson Group from a single construction project into one of the most successful development companies in the region. We've created thousands of jobs, built hundreds of commercial properties, and generated billions of dollars in economic activity. Polite applause rippled around the table. Dad's achievements were genuinely impressive. He'd transformed our city's skyline and provided livelihoods for entire communities. Marcus has proven himself a worthy successor, bringing innovative strategies and modern technology to our operations. Under his leadership, our development division has expanded into 3 new markets. More applause, warmer this time. Marcus beamed with the satisfaction of someone whose success was publicly acknowledged and celebrated. Jennifer has built an outstanding legal career, making partner at Morrison & Associates ahead of schedule and establishing herself as one of the most respected corporate attorneys in the state. Jennifer smiled graciously, accepting recognition for achievements that had required years of 80-hour weeks and fierce professional competition. But Dad's tone shifted slightly, becoming more serious. Success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about family legacy, about building something that lasts, about each generation contributing to something larger than themselves. I could sense where this was heading and felt my stomach tighten. Which brings me to a difficult conversation, Dad continued, his eyes finding mine across the table. Rebecca, sweetheart, I need to address something that's been concerning your mother and me for quite some time. The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone focused on what was clearly about to become a family intervention disguised as birthday dinner conversation. You're 32 years old, Dad said, his voice carrying the weight of paternal disappointment. You have an excellent education, you're intelligent and capable, and you come from a family that's built significant business success. But for 6 years you've been drifting. The word drifting hung in the air like an accusation. Working with small startups, doing administrative consulting, helping companies with basic organizational tasks. These aren't careers, Rebecca. They're temporary jobs that someone with your background and opportunities should have moved beyond years ago. Around the table, I could see people nodding sympathetically. From their perspective, Dad was delivering necessary tough love to a daughter who'd been underachieving despite every advantage. The Peterson Group has annual revenues of $215 million. Dad continued. We employ over 800 people across 4 states. We're expanding into international markets next year. This is the kind of business success that takes generations to build. He paused, letting the magnitude of the family empire settle over the room. But legacy isn't just about what one generation accomplishes. It's about what they pass on to the next generation and whether that next generation proves worthy of the inheritance. The direction of this speech was becoming uncomfortably clear. Marcus has proven himself worthy. Jennifer has built something meaningful in her own field. But Rebecca... His voice trailed off as he looked at me with obvious disappointment. You're a disappointment to this family, he said finally, his words landing like physical blows. Not because you're unsuccessful, but because you're settling for so much less than what you're capable of. You're wasting opportunities that most people would kill for. My siblings were nodding in agreement, their expressions suggesting this was a conversation they'd been wanting to have for years. Furthermore, Dad continued, your choices reflect poorly on our family's reputation. When people ask about my children, I can proudly discuss Marcus's achievements at Peterson Group and Jennifer's success in law. But what do I say about Rebecca? That she's 32 years old and still doing temporary consulting work for companies that can barely afford to pay her. The shame in his voice was unmistakable. I wasn't just disappointing him personally, I was embarrassing him professionally. So I've made a decision, Dad announced. Effective immediately, Rebecca will join Peterson Group as a junior associate. She'll work directly under Marcus, learning the business properly, contributing to something meaningful instead of wasting her potential on these small-time consulting projects. The room erupted in polite applause, everyone clearly approving of this practical solution to the family's black sheep problem. "That's wonderful, William," said Thomas Mitchell approvingly. "Sometimes young people need firm guidance to reach their potential." "Rebecca's lucky to have family willing to give her real opportunities," added Sarah Chin. "Not everyone gets a chance to learn from such successful mentors." Marcus was beaming with the satisfaction of someone who'd just been given authority over a wayward sibling. "Don't worry, Rebecca. I'll make sure you understand how real business works. No more of this small startup consulting. You'll be dealing with major developments, serious investors, actual consequences." I sat there absorbing the full impact of what had just happened. In front of 50 of the most powerful business leaders in our region, my father had publicly declared me a disappointment and announced that I needed to be rescued from my own poor career choices. My phone rang. In the middle of this humiliating family intervention, with 50 people witnessing my father's disappointment in my life choices, my phone started ringing with the distinctive tone I'd assigned to calls from my executive assistant. "Rebecca," Dad said sharply, "I thought I told you to silence that." But something made me look at the caller ID. It was Lisa Park, my assistant, who only called during family events if something absolutely critical had happened. "I need to take this," I said quietly. "Rebecca, whatever small business crisis you're dealing with can wait." I answered the call anyway. "Hi, Lisa." "Ms. Williams." Lisa's voice was bubbling with excitement. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your father's birthday dinner, but I couldn't wait to tell you. The Peterson Group acquisition just finalized. All the paperwork went through, the wire transfers completed, and the board resolution passed unanimously." The room had gone completely silent. 50 people were staring at me as Lisa's voice carried clearly in the quiet dining room. The total purchase price was exactly as we discussed, $427 million. This makes Meridian Holdings the largest commercial development company in the region, and honestly probably in the entire state. Dad's champagne glass had frozen halfway to his lips. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Around the table, 50 of the most sophisticated business leaders in our city were hanging on every word of this impossible conversation. "Should I put you on speaker, Lisa?" I asked calmly. "If you'd like," she replied, clearly confused by the background silence she was hearing. "Is this a bad time?" "No, it's perfect timing actually." I held up my phone so her voice would carry clearly across the dining room. "Lisa, could you repeat what you just told me? About the acquisition?" There was a brief pause as she processed this unusual request, but Lisa had been working with me long enough to trust my judgment even when she didn't understand the context. "Of course. Meridian Holdings has successfully acquired the Peterson Group for $427 million. The transaction completed this afternoon, making you the owner of the largest commercial development company in the region." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the soft jazz music playing in the restaurant's main dining room 4 floors below us. "Lisa," I continued, "could you remind me what our annual revenues will be now with Peterson Group included in our portfolio?" "Combined annual revenues of approximately $650 million across all our holdings. Peterson Group's $215 million, plus our existing portfolio of $435 million from the other acquisitions." Dad's mouth was opening and closing without sound. Marcus had gone completely pale. Around the table, 50 of the most successful people in our city were staring at me with expressions ranging from bewilderment to something that might have been awe. "And how many employees does that represent?" I asked. "Just over 2,000 across all companies with operations in 7 states and 3 countries. "Thank you, Lisa. Could you email me the final paperwork? I'll review everything tomorrow morning." "Absolutely. And Ms. Williams? Congratulations. What you've built over the past 6 years is extraordinary. You should be incredibly proud." I hung up and slipped my phone back into my purse. The dining room remained silent with all eyes focused on me. Finally, Thomas Mitchell found his voice. "Rebecca, did your assistant just say you bought Peterson Group?" "That's correct." "For $427 million? "Yes." Dad was staring at me like I was a complete stranger. "That's impossible. Rebecca, Peterson Group isn't for sale." "I own Peterson Group." "You own Peterson Group," I corrected gently. "As of 4:30 this afternoon, Meridian Holdings owns Peterson Group. Along with Mitchell Construction, Chin Hotels, Morrison Financial Services, and about 15 other companies in our region. The names I just listed represented some of the most successful businesses owned by people sitting at this very table. Thomas Mitchell's face had gone white. You own Mitchell Construction? Meridian Holdings owns 60% of Mitchell Construction, yes. We acquired it 18 months ago when you were looking for capital to expand into the Charlotte market. But I thought those were just investors. Silent partners. Meridian Holdings specializes in acquiring controlling interests in successful regional companies while allowing the existing management teams to maintain operational control. You've been working for me for a year and a half. Sarah Chin was frantically checking something on her phone. Chin Hotels. You own Chin Hotels? 75% as of last year. Your expansion into the Florida market was funded through Meridian Holdings. One by one, I watched the faces around the table as they realized the scope of what I'd built while they thought I was doing administrative consulting for small companies. Dr. Martinez was the first to ask the obvious question. How many companies does Meridian Holdings own? 23 controlling interests in companies across 7 states, plus minority stakes in another 41 businesses. We specialize in acquiring successful regional companies that need capital for expansion. Dad found his voice again, though it was barely a whisper. $650 million in annual revenue? That's our projected number for next year, yes. And you employ 2,000 people? 2,043 as of last month. Marcus was still staring at me in shock. Rebecca, how is this possible? You've been living in that little apartment, driving that old car, wearing... He gestured helplessly at my simple business attire. I live modestly because I reinvest profits back into acquisitions. The apartment is convenient to my office, the car is reliable, and expensive clothes don't make my companies any more profitable. Your office. Jennifer had found her voice, though she sounded strangled. Meridian Holdings headquarters. 42nd floor of the Winston Tower downtown. I'm sure you've seen the building. We own that too. Winston Tower was the tallest building in our city's financial district, the gleaming glass monument that dominated our skyline and housed the headquarters of our region's most important companies. You own Winston Tower? Patricia Davidson looked like she was having trouble processing this information. The building, the parking structures, and about 6 blocks of surrounding commercial real estate. Each revelation seemed to make the scope of my success more real and more impossible to ignore. Rebecca, Dad said slowly, when you said you were doing consulting work. I was consulting with business owners who wanted to sell their companies or needed capital for expansion. I was consulting with investors who wanted to acquire successful regional businesses. I was consulting with management teams about how to transition ownership while maintaining operational independence. But you let us think. His voice trailed off as he tried to process what he'd just learned. I let you think what you wanted to think. When you assumed I was doing administrative work for small startups, I didn't correct you. When you offered advice about finding a real job, I listened politely. When you worried about my career prospects, I thanked you for your concern. But why? Marcus's voice was plaintive. Why let us worry about you when you were building this? I looked around the table at 50 faces that had completely transformed over the past 10 minutes. The polite concern had been replaced by shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. Because I wanted to see if you could love me when you thought I was unsuccessful. The words landed like a physical blow. Of course we love you, Dad protested automatically. We've always loved you. Have you? Because 10 minutes ago, you publicly declared me a disappointment to this family. You announced that my career choices were embarrassing to your reputation. You decided I needed to be rescued from my own poor judgment. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. And Marcus, I continued, looking at my brother who'd been so eager to teach me how real business worked. You've been working for me for 18 months without knowing it. Peterson Group's expansion into international markets? That was funded by Meridian Holdings. Your innovative strategies in modern technology? Those were recommendations from our consulting team. Marcus was staring at me with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. The irony is perfect, I said, standing up from the table. You were all so concerned about my lack of success that you never noticed I was more successful than any of you had ever imagined. Dr. Martinez was still scrolling through articles about Meridian Holdings on his phone. Rebecca, there are business journal features about your acquisition strategy. Forbes has written about your approach to regional business consolidation. You're being called one of the most innovative investment strategists under 35. That's very flattering. Flattering. Sarah Chen's voice was hollow. Rebecca, you own half the major businesses in this region. You've built something that's beyond what most people could ever dream of achieving. And you did it while we were offering you career advice, Jennifer added, her voice thick with regret. I looked at my family, the people who'd spent the evening celebrating Dad's success while treating me like someone who needed their guidance to achieve anything meaningful. Dad, Peterson Group was a remarkable achievement, I said sincerely. Building it from nothing, creating thousands of jobs, transforming our city's economy. That's genuinely impressive work that's made a real difference in people's lives. He nodded mutely. But Peterson Group was also exactly the kind of successful regional company that Meridian Holdings specializes in acquiring. You built something wonderful and now it's part of something even larger. Part of something you built, he said quietly. Part of something I built while you thought I was a disappointment who needed to be rescued from my own poor choices. The weight of that realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. My phone buzzed with another call from a business journalist wanting to interview me about the acquisition. I declined it, but it immediately started ringing with a different number. I should probably take these, I said to the room. Apparently acquiring $427 million worth of commercial real estate attracts media attention. I started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Dad. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you enjoy working for Meridian Holdings. Marcus has been doing excellent work as your VP. I'm sure he'll continue to be a valuable asset under the new ownership structure. As I walked out of Blackstone Manor, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, congratulations from my executive team, and meeting requests from other business owners who wanted to discuss potential acquisitions. But as I sat in my 10-year-old Honda in the parking garage beneath one of the buildings I owned, I realized I wasn't thinking about business or media attention or even the satisfaction of proving my family wrong. I was thinking about the look on Dad's face when he realized that his daughter, the one he'd just declared a disappointment to the family, had bought his company while he was explaining why she was a failure. The daughter he'd thought needed to be rescued had been doing the rescuing all along. 6 months later, I was featured on the cover of Business Week. The article was titled The Silent Empire: How Rebecca Williams Built a Regional Business Dynasty While Her Family Thought She Was Unemployed. It told the story of Meridian Holdings, of the innovative acquisition strategies that had made me one of the youngest successful business consolidators in the country, of the philosophy that had turned strategic investment into a regional economic transformation. But it also told the story of my family, of the assumptions they'd made and how those assumptions had been shattered at a birthday dinner that changed everything. It discussed the danger of equating visible success with actual achievement, the importance of understanding what people are really building before judging their choices. The article included a photo of our family at the Meridian Holdings annual shareholders meeting. Dad, Marcus, Jennifer, and I standing together in the conference room where billion-dollar decisions were made, all of us smiling genuinely as we discussed the company's expansion plans. The caption read, "The Williams Family Today, Learning to See Success in New Ways." It wasn't perfect. Relationships that had been built on false assumptions don't heal overnight. But it was honest, and it was real, and it was based on truth instead of expectations. And for the first time since I'd started Meridian Holdings, I felt like I could share my success with the people who were supposed to love me most instead of hiding it from their disappointment. The daughter they'd thought was a disappointment had been building an empire that included their own company. And now, finally, they could see the difference.